All right, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. So it looks like we got a couple in here. We'll start here with Dan A. So Dan A says, "Hey Q, I just want to clarify something. Remember in the power turn where the shoulders catch up with the hips and the straight line release, 45 degrees in front of the ball. Should I continue turning after that to the full finish, or should the momentum of the club head make me turn to the finish automatically?" Yeah, we want to keep pushing and keep turning all the way around into the full finish. Now, the momentum of your arms and everything coming through will help with that. But yeah, we just want to keep turning. Basically, when you come around to the full finish, right? So as you come around into the full finish, your hips are going to be pointing toward the target, and then the momentum of your arms and everything will bring kind of your chest and everything to be pointing a little bit left of the target, depending on your flexibility. If you're not very flexible, this may be your finish. If you look at, I think his name was Taylor Moore. He was the guy who he won. I want to say it was the Honda, maybe something like that. But anyway, it was several weeks ago. He won, but he turns his shoulders. His shoulders are pointing 90 degrees left of the target. He's coming all the way around into a full finish. So, but yeah, you're going to keep pushing your hips all the way around. The momentum of your arms will help, but it's not something that's necessarily going to be automatic. But it will definitely help you to get there. So Michael M says, "I have trouble keeping my eyes focused on the ball when I transition in the swing. Is there a drill you would recommend to help me keep my head and eyes still during the transition and downswing?" So really that just comes down to the stable fluid spine. I mean, that I would just work through the stable fluid spine course. That's essentially what that is. Your head and your eyes are connected to that, right? So if your spine is moving around everywhere, then it's going to be difficult. So I just make sure that you're turning around a stable fluid spine, right? You're turning and tilting. That's what keeps the head relatively still, right? So what I mean by turning and tilting will be your shoulders doing this, right? So in my backswing, I'm going to go into left tilt. Where that's coming from is from my thoracic spine here, the middle of my spine, right? So when I turn, if I were just to turn and not extend my spine and tilt, then my backswing would be like this. So I'm going to have a little bit of back extension, hip extension there. Then I'm going to have some tilt down. And that's what allows, if I were to just keep my head on a swivel here, right, and then just turn, right, I'm turning, tilting, extending my spine, right? So I'm turning, I'm tilting, and then I'm extending a little bit. I'm doing that, right? So turning, tilting, extending the spine, that's what's going to keep you in that good position. So doing drills from the stable fluid spine course are going to help you to do those things, right? So that's what I'd recommend working through is a stable fluid spine course. To get to that course, click the instruction tab, then top speed golf system, then the stable fluid spine course. Work through the levels, and you'll be in better shape there. So Mark says, "Good morning, Q. I think you mentioned in past office hours going through the 20-minute shallow fixed course with different clubs. Do you think this would help me to hit my mid iron or my mid to long irons better?" Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, basically, you're going to get some transference. If I don't know if you went through what club you went through it with it before, but you're going to get some transference from that club, up to longer clubs. But yeah, if you're struggling coming down steep with longer clubs, then yeah, just go through the 20-minute shallow fix with those clubs too. Definitely. All right, let's keep the questions coming. I got a door that's like creaking. I'm gonna go shut that real quick, and I'll be right back. All right. if you're just jumping on here, I'm just waiting for some questions to be asked. We've already answered all the questions so far. So if you got any new ones, go ahead and post them, and we'll get them answered. So Troy P says, should the spine angle remain the same throughout the swing until contact? No, so the spine angle is definitely going to change, right? So if you go to the stable fluid spine course, this is basically just a summary of the stable fluid spine course, right? So at address, we want to have some tilt of our spine a little bit away from the target. The reason for this is, one, it puts your body in good alignments, right? So our trail hand is lower on the club, right? So if I set up straight up and down with my spine and then I reach to get my trail hand on the club, well, look what happens to my alignments. My body, my shoulders are going to open up. My hips are typically going to open up a little bit too. So if I get my spine tilted, that's going to lower my right shoulder, and that's going to allow me to put my trail hand on the club without opening up my body. So now if I have spine tilt, now I can have everything nice and squared up here. So that's one reason. The other reason is that we want to be in a slightly angled away position at the top. And if we set up angled away at address, that allows us to get into that very similar position. So from address to the top, the overall angle of our body is going to mostly remain the same, right? So if I'm here, I'm slightly angled away from the target. As I go up to the top, I want to remain slightly angled away from the target, right? Now, as I come down to impact, what's going to happen is my hips are going to shift forward, right? And they may even start moving a little bit forward as I get up to the top. Typically, when you look at better players, you're going to see the hips, they move into their trail side, and then you're going to see that those hips turning back and around, and the hips are actually starting to move toward the target as they get up to the top of the swing. But the hips are going to move more forward as we come down into impact. Now, our head isn't going to move that far forward, right? Our head may move forward, fractionally or a little bit. And when that happens, that's going to make your spine angle more away from the target, right? So here I'm at address. I'd say 6 to 8 degrees, somewhere in that area. If I go up to the top, again, overall angle of my body is going to be in that 6 to 8 degree range. I'm going to be shifting my hips forward, right? And then you can see as I come into contact here, now my body is more in an angled away position, right? So that's because my body's opened up and because my hips have shifted forward more, right? And that's going to put me in that 18 to 25 degree angled away position that we see the better players. So because the hips shift forward and because our body is opening up as we come into contact, that spine is going to get more angled away as you come into contact, or that overall angle of your body is going to get more angled away. All right, looks like we got some more questions here. Good to see. So J.H. Hassler says, good morning, Q. I got your having a great day. Sometimes I lose my grip at the top of the backswing, like the club is moving around in my hands. Is there something you've seen before? And if so, any tips? So first, I would just make sure that you have a secure grip. So what that means is just checking your grip to make sure that you're not holding it in a way that's going to cause you to have poor grip security. So let's go over the grip real quick and exactly how we want to have that in the hand. So we want to have it a little bit in the hands and a little bit in the fingers, right? So what I mean by that is a little bit in the palm of your hand and a little bit in the finger. So if I hold it, the best way to kind of think about it is I want the club going through my finger right here. So in between these two knuckles right here, and then above my pinky, the base of my pinky here. So below the base of your pointer, above the base of your pinky, right? So if I have the club, I want it going through just like that. So you can see how that's a little bit in my hand, a little bit in my fingers, right? And then I'm just going to wrap my hands around there. And I want to make sure that I have my thumb close to my hand like this. I don't want to have a big gap. If I have a big gap there, that could be part of the problem with the security. You can see there, if I have a gap right here, when I bring this club back, that club may want to move in my hand. So if I close that gap, right, now I have my thumb close to my hand, I'm going to be in a good spot there, right? Now, I don't want to hold it entirely in the fingers, right? If I hold it entirely in my fingers, then I'm going to have that gap there, and I'm going to have what's called a long thumb, right? You see how my thumb is outstretched past my hand there. And I don't want it all the way in my hand like this, right? That gives me the short thumb. But the problem is now I don't really have the ability to hinge the club. I'm also going to have some gapping in here, which could cause some security issues. So if I put it above the base of my, below the base of my pointer, above the base of my pinky, right? And I wrap it around, now I have good grip security, right? I don't have these big gaps in here. I have my short thumb, and I can also hinge the club plenty, right? So that's what I want to do with the lead hand. And then with the trail hand, what you want to look at is on your hand, you have these meaty parts of your hand. So you have the thumb pad here and the heel pad here, right? So if you squeeze those together, you're going to see a crease right there in between. I want to put that crease either on top of or on the side of my lead thumb. So it'd be kind of, if you're looking at the grip here, it would be kind of like that, right? So it can be there or it can be there. As far as where you put it, either on top of or more on the side, I would look at kind of what you struggle with in the swing. If you struggle to close the club face, I would say probably pertains to most people, the majority of people, then I would have it more on the side, right? More that crease more on the side. If you struggle to close the face too much, right? Then putting it more on top may help, right? So if I put it there, and if I put it more on the side, and again, I don't want to have a big gap between my thumb and my hand here, right? Because again, that's going to just open up the club to be able to move around. I want to have, I want to have that nice and tight right there. Not, you don't have to be pushing it in there, but I just don't want to have a big gap right there. So I put that on the side. So that would be kind of what my grip would look like, right? So that's going to give you some good grip security. Now, if you are losing grip of the club, it may be because, if you have good grip security, let's say that you do have a great grip, that's not the issue, but you're losing grip of the club. It's probably because you're trying to overhinge the club at the top. So you're trying to lengthen this club, right? So you're taking your right hand and probably pulling this back. And when you do that, kind of takes it out of your lead hand a little bit, right? Where sometimes we get the momentum of the club and we get going really far across the line, right? Where our left wrist can only bend back so much, right? So if you get it going up, and then your right arm is really pushing this back and really hinging this club too much, well, now I can't hold on to the club very much with my lead hand. Right? You can see how my right hand is kind of overpowering my swing up to the top, and it's taking it out of my left hand, right? So what I would look at is, okay, am I hinging the club too much, right? If you're trying to hinge the club too much, your right hand's like pulling this club down and pulling it out of your lead hand, then I would work on basically feeling like you have a lot less hinge, right? I know it may feel more powerful to have more hinge, but it's actually taking power away from you because now you have to re-grip the club. And typically, if you have too much hinge at the top, you're going to tend to burn up your energy very quickly in the start of the downswing. When what we want to do, what we want to have is something around a 90-degree angle at the top between your lead arm and the shaft. And then in the downswing, I'm actually going to create some lag, right? Whereas if we're over hinging the club, right, we're getting here, we're pulling that club out of our hands, well, then I'm going to tend to throw it out to start the downswing. So I'd be feeling, working on getting a lot less hinge at the top, just feeling like the club head's a lot wider at the top. You may need to feel like you're like this, right? And then in the downswing, you're creating that angle, right? So that could be something you look at. And then I would look at if your right arm is really flaring out away from your body quite a bit. Again, that can really move this out of my hand, right? So doing drills to keep your right arm, your right elbow more in, feeling that basically what I like to try to feel is that your right elbow never ever gets behind your rib cage, right? Or gets behind your shirt seam on the side. So if I'm going up to the top, I don't want to get that going back behind me. I want to keep it in front. And that also helps with things in the downswing. If that elbow gets really, really far behind you like this, when we start the downswing, we're going to typically come down steep, right? And then we're going to stand up out of it and flip and all that stuff that we don't want to do. So if you look at better players, they're typically going to have that right arm more in front of the shirt seam. So that way, when they start the downswing, that right arm can just lower into a really good position, allow you to shallow out the club. So keeping that right arm, what's called external rotation. So you can think of that as losing an arm wrestling contest, having that right arm, having that feeling at the top. Some people might think of it as holding a tray, like as a waiter. So if I'm going up the top, I want to hold that tray at the top. You can see in order to do that, I'm having to kind of lose the arm wrestling contest to make that happen. If I'm at the top and I'm like this, well, I'm going to spill the tray. I'm going to, if I have a bunch of drinks on the tray, I'm going to spill them everywhere. So I want to have it like this, so that way I can support the club, right, and not be pulling it out of my lead hand. So Paul C says, when shallowing the club, do I need to make a conscious effort to drop the club behind the hands, or is it initiated by the lower body? So I get questions like this all the time, where people ask me, am I consciously doing this? Am I actively doing this? Does this happen naturally? And things like that. So the answer to the question is always, if you look at yourself on video and you see that you're not doing something that you want to do, then you're going to need to make some sort of conscious effort to make that happen, right? Otherwise, it won't change. There's nothing that's going to suddenly make that happen, right? So if you're someone whose arms are out of position, now you can initiate with the lower body all you want, but if your arms are not in a place that allows that club head to drop behind your hand. So we just talked about the elbow, right? Getting that elbow like this. Well, if you go up to the top of the swing and you're like this, and I start down and I'm just initiating with my lower body, well, that doesn't shallow out the club, right? I'm going to need to make a conscious effort to get my arms in a position to where that club can get behind me. So what if you want something to change in your swing, you have to do something consciously to make it change. Otherwise, it will not change, right? Now, it could be indirect, right? It could be, if you look at yourself on video and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to initiate with the lower body, and then you see the club head dropping behind you, then there you go. There's the answer to your question, right? But if you're initiating with the lower body and your club head is not getting behind you, you're going to need to make some sort of conscious effort to make that happen, right? And you need to keep doing that until eventually you don't anymore. You have to work through the stages of learning. So there's 4 stages of learning. We'll go through those real quick. So number 1, we have unconscious incompetence. So this is where you're unaware of what even shallowing is, and you don't know how to do it, right? You're just completely unaware. You're in the dark, right? Then you move into stage 2, which is conscious incompetence. So this is where now you know that you need to shallow out the club, but you just don't know how to do it, right? You're asking, okay, do I initiate the body? Do I have to consciously do something? So on and so forth. And then you work into stage 3, which is called conscious competence. So this is where you're able to get the club shallowing out, but you have to think about something consciously in order to make that happen, right? And the moment you don't think about that, you go right back to what you're doing before. And you have to stay in stage 3 and keep doing that until eventually you work into stage 4, which is called unconscious competence. So this is where you've done it so many times that it's just second nature. You couldn't even imagine doing anything else, right? It becomes natural, it becomes conscious. And if you think about it, anything that you've ever learned to do, you've worked through this process. So you typed this message, right? I assume you probably know how to type. At some point when you started typing, you didn't really know what you were doing. You were pointing and pecking probably the whole time. You had to make a conscious effort to diligently, figure out how to type until eventually you got to where you're looking at the screen and you're just thinking about words and your fingers are just doing it, right? And there's not really much of a conscious effort to make it happen. So it's the same thing. If you want to change things in your golf swing, you have to do the same thing. So that's That's what I would recommend doing. But you're going to need to make some sort of conscious effort if you're not making a conscious effort and you're not doing what you want to do. All right, let's keep going. So Gary S says, I'm a right-handed. I am a right-handed, and I have fused right wrist, which does not allow me to bend it back very far. Would a baseball grip help me to shallow better? Certainly could. A stronger grip would certainly help you to shallow better, because if you have a weaker grip, you're going to have to bend your wrist more. If you have a stronger grip, you can keep that wrist in a fairly flat position. So if I would just use a very, very strong grip, so that'd be a grip where your lead hand's more on top, trail hand more under, right? So if I have my trail hand more under and I come into contact, I can be like this. My right wrist is not bent back very far, right? And when I go up to the top of the swing, I can have some cupping in my wrist, and my right wrist doesn't have to bend back as far, right? So I would just have a very strong grip. That's what's going to suit you to be able to hit good golf shots. Now, if I have a weak grip, right, my lead hand, and you can play around with a baseball grip, but I can tell you right now, you're just going to need a stronger grip. No matter if you use a baseball grip, but then have a baseball grip in a weak place. So let's say you have a baseball grip that's like this. When you go up to the top of the swing, right, if you're weak, that club face is going to be open, right? You're still going to have to come to contact and have that wrist be in a more bent back position if you have a weak grip. So really what you're just going to need is a strong grip. So lead hand more on top, trail hand more under. Because if I have a weaker grip, right, if I take a standard, let's say interlock grip where my fingers are interlocked here, and I go up to the top of the swing, well, I'm going to have that right wrist more bent back at the top. And when I come to impact, I'm going to have that right wrist more bent back. Whereas if I have a stronger grip, I can have that trail wrist be in a flatter position. So Don says, can you go over how to properly set up camera behind you? Yeah, so for a down the line view, what I'd recommend doing is using an alignment stick or a club. If you don't have an alignment stick, you can pick these up at any large home improvement store. I'm not sure if you live in the United States or not, but if you live in the U.S., Lowe's, Menards, Home Depot, they all have these things, and they're a few dollars. You can also get them in golf stores, but they're more expensive there, but they're pretty much the same thing, right? The only thing that's different about their golf store in golf stores is they're usually shorter, so that way, So what I have on mine, I actually put a head cover on them so they don't scratch up anything. And then they also don't have the, head, but these are cheap. You can get them at any home improvement store. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this on the ground and just line it up with a target. Whatever your target is, just line it up with that. And then when you go to set up the camera, right, you're just going to set up the camera. And I would use like a tripod or something like that. You can go on Amazon and search phone tripod, and you'll find all kinds of options. I've got one that I've used for probably 10 years and still chugging, and I think I paid less than $20 for it. So that's what I'd recommend is a tripod. There's other options out there for sure, but the most cost-efficient one and the most stable one, and they're not real heavy. Like the cheap ones, they're like made out of aluminum. They're super lightweight. They fold up really compact. They'll fit in most golf bags. I have like a Jones, walking bag, carry bag, and it fits, I have some decent sized pockets in it, but it's not, it's not taking a huge footprint in my bag. So anyway, I'm going to set up my tripod directly behind this. So I'm going to have this to where it's shooting straight down this. So when you set up your camera to look, your phone or whatever you're looking at, this stick should be straight up and down on the camera, right? So let me try to get it lined up on here. It's pretty close on here. Just probably have to move it over just a little bit, and then like that. I think that's going to be pretty close to straight up and down, right? So if you were to draw a line straight up and down, it might be a little bit off, but basically you want this to be straight up and down, right? And then, so you set it up straight up and down. You want to have it at about hip level. So it'll be about at this height here. people are shorter and taller. So for you, if you're taller, it may be up a little bit higher. If you're short, it may be a little bit lower. But around hip level, pocket level, waist level, that's where you want it. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we don't want it up here. We don't want it to be looking down because it's going to look different. We don't want it on the ground because again, it's going to look different. So get it about, midway up your body. You're going to be in good shape if you do that. And then when you go to set up to hit your shot, you need to have your toes up here close to the stick and have your toes the same distance away from the stick. So you don't want to set up like this or like this, right? You want to get up there close to it. I would say within a club head would be where you'd want to be, right? And have it the same distance. So like if this one's 2 inches away from the stick, have this one 2 inches away from the stick, right? And then that's your camera angle. And then the last thing is you want to make sure that you're far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame, right? So you don't want your legs cut off. You don't want the top of the swing cut off. If the club head goes barely out of frame and then comes back in, that's fine. But, if you're working with an instructor, an instructor is going to be looking at the club face throughout the swing. And if it goes way out of frame and it's way out of frame over here and we can't see what's going on, it's going to be hard for somebody to help you. And if you're analyzing your own swing, it's going to be hard to see what's going on. So just to summarize, we want to be set up down the toe line at hip level and far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame throughout the entire swing. If you do that, you'll be able to get good video. So use the alignment stick, makes it very, very easy. And what I'd also do is I would try to set it up the same way every single time. So, I just kind of pace it off, right? So if I know I'm going to be hitting from about right there, maybe I take 3 big steps and that's how far I set up the camera. If that gets everybody in the frame, then good. Now just set it up the same way. Maybe it's 4 steps. Maybe it's 2.5 steps. Whatever it is, set it up the same way every time. So that way you're comparing apples to apples. That's a big place where people tend to struggle, looking at their swing is they'll see, okay, well, I was coming over the top in this one. Now I'm not coming over the top or vice versa. Well, the reality is you just had the camera set up wrong. Right. And, it's your perspective changes, right? We're looking at something that is 3D, but we're looking at it in 2D. So it makes a big deal where the perspective is. So the alignment stick should be along the toe line, not the target line. Yes, exactly. It needs to be set up down the toe line, not the target line. So the reason is, let's say we have the camera set up here, right? And let's say that it's set up down the target line here, right? And let's say I'm coming down and I've got this club, right? It's coming down like this. So it's inside the hands. It looks great, right? Well, if I'm not going to move where the club is, I'm just going to scoot my feet up to where the toe line is, where the ball would be. Now look at where that club is. Now it looks steep, right? And it actually is steep if you're doing that. So if you got set up down the target line and that you got that club working, it's going to make it look like it's more from the inside than what it actually is, or less over the top than what it actually is. And that's probably the one thing people struggle with the most is coming down steep. And if you're setting up the camera to make it look like you're coming down less steep than what you actually are, then you can be setting yourself up for failure. All right, so Torpe says, I'm struggling to keep the spine angle tilted away from the target at the top of the swing. Is this because my backswing is too steep or hip slide or lifting my head at the top? Is there a feedback mechanism? Feedback mechanism is going to be camera, right? There really isn't. It could be hips. Usually when people lose their spine angle, it is hips. Feedback mechanism for that could be a chair, right? So usually when we look at, if I grab my chair here, when we look at, tour players, what you're going to see, right, is you're going to see at address from the very start of the swing, they'll move their hips away from the target just slightly. Usually it's like less than an inch, and that's only to get pressure into the trail foot. So they're shifting their weight to the trail side, pressure in the trail foot. Now, as they get up to the top, they're actually going to start moving their hip back and around, and their hip will actually start moving toward the target a little bit. So it'll look something like this. I'm going to be set up, little shift to the trail side, Then as I'm going up to the top, right, I'm moving my hip back and around, right? So if I'm sliding my hips, right, if I move in front of the chair, if I shift to my trail side and I just keep sliding my hips, well, look, my spine angle is going to change, right? So if it's a hip thing, you can set up this, and the goal would be to set up to it, have it, get in your setup position, then scoot the chair up to where it's just touching your hip. You're going to nudge the chair to start the backswing, and then as you get up to the top, you're going to gradually create a gap as you get up to the top, and usually that gap is like an inch or two, something like that. It's not a huge gap. We're not going like this, right? We're just creating a small gap, and most of that's being created as you get to the very, very top of the swing. So usually it's nudge the chair, then I'm just touching the chair, and then that gap gets created as I get up to the top. Right? That's usually what's happening. So that's a feedback mechanism that you can set up if it's related to that. One thing you can do is you can get in, if your head is moving a lot, so let's say you do have a gap there, but then you're just extending your spine too much that way. What you can do is you can do some reps. Now you won't be able to hit a ball, right? But you can get some feedback by kind of doing some reps in your house. If you put your head up against the doorway and then just make sure that you stay behind that, right? So that'd be another way to do it. One way you can do it with a ball would be to take a ball and, put the maybe the markings on it to where you can barely see it at the top, or you can barely see it at rest. So if I'm looking down here, I can barely see the what's on the side of the ball here, right? Now, if I shift my hips this way, I'm not going to be able to see it, right? So if I get my head going this way too much, I'm not going to be able to see it. So I want to get to where I can make sure I can still see that at the top of the swing. So that'd be another thing that you can do to make sure that you're in a good position there. Let's keep the questions coming here. We got not quite 30 minutes left. So Troy P says, I'm a beginner trying to break 100. Should I practice just a couple of wedges to be proficient on the short game? Yeah, so I would definitely, I think if you're a beginner, I think the short game is definitely a place where you're going to probably pick up the most strokes. I would only really use wedges if you absolutely have to. I would really try to get better at hitting like bump and run type shots. So chipping with like your 8 or your 9 iron, getting the ball on the green and rolling toward the target as soon as possible. Wedges are harder to hit. They have a sharper leading edge, so you have to be more consistent and more precise with where you're hitting the ground because the club will tend to want to dig. So, but yeah, I would try to get a good feel with one wedge really around the greens if you need to. But in situations where you don't need to, then I'd recommend working on chipping with lower lofted clubs. It's typically going to be a more higher percentage play, especially for a beginner trying to break 100. If you want to check out some awesome courses and some great drills to help you with your chipping, check out our Chipping Mastery course. We have a course that's going to walk you through all the things you need to know for chipping. So if you want to check it out, if you go to the homepage by clicking the house icon, that will take you to the homepage. And then if you scroll down the homepage, you'll see a list of all the courses there. Select that Chipping Mastery course and get started on those drills. So Don says, so turning your spine, but you keep the head pretty still, right? Yeah. So when you go up to the top of the swing, what's going to be happening is your hips or your spine, excuse me, is going to be turning, right? So if I keep my head or my hips dead still, I can turn my rib cage, right? So they're going to be turning. There's going to be some of that happening. There's going to be some tilting happening. So if I keep my hips level, I can tilt my hips down, right? And then there's going to be some extending of my spine as well. So I'm going to be going like this a little bit. So all those things together allow you to turn and stay in your posture and keep your head relatively still. So when I turn my shoulders like this, right, all those things have happened, right? Because if I don't extend my spine, right, then it looks like this, right? If I don't tilt my spine, then it looks like this, right? If I don't turn my spine, then it looks like this, right? Or, kind of like this, I guess. So I'm tilting. So if I get my posture here, I'm going to extend a little bit. So I'm doing this a little bit, just a little bit. It's not a lot, a little bit. I'm going to tilt and then I'm going to turn. And there's the top of the swing. So Willis says, lately I'm blocking shots right and my right arm is pressed into my side at impact. Willis might be the likely cause of this. Probably not rotating enough. So I'd work on really trying turning through, because what blocks come from is your club path working way too much into out, right? And then your club face is basically just pointed in that same direction. So if you're a right-handed golfer, you are swinging too much toward first base, then your club face is also pointing kind of toward first base. So you're kind of coming in like this is what it sounds like. So what you need to do is you just need to rotate more. I try to feel like your body is really opening up toward third base. I would try to feel like this, right? Like you're swinging toward third base, and that will help you to swing more toward the target. So it's kind of the fault, feel, real approach. The fault is too much from the inside. The feel is too much. You want to feel actually probably over the top. And then hopefully the real is somewhere in between those, right? So that's what I'd recommend doing, is working on, kind of feeling like you're a little bit more over the top. So Tom M says, Q, I know feel is different for everyone, but where do you feel tension or tightness, or maybe not at all, when you make a full backswing, when the club is nearly parallel to the ground? Chest, trail arm, neck, legs, etc. Thanks. I don't really feel in the beginning of the swing, there's not going to be much tension or tightness at club parallel to the ground. Really, to here, it's really all I'm really doing is I'm just kind of turning my chest back. So I shift pressure into the trail foot. So a little shift off the ball, just a little bit. I apply the pressure and I turn my chest back. So it's almost like, if I were to toss a ball that way, right? If I'm just tossing a ball, I don't really feel any tension or tightness anywhere. It feels pretty loose, right? So it's just that. So if I were to shift something, if I were to toss something that way, it'd be just like that. So that's really what my backswing is to that club parallel. It's just this. No tension or tightness or anything. So sorry, I should have said when the club is fully at the top of the backswing. So yeah, it's going to be more in the hands where you're going to feel more tightness because the club is switching directions. So you're going to feel the club when it's switching directions. You're going to feel that there's going to be tension building in the hands because the club is switching directions. So if I'm going like that, you're going to feel tension, right? So I'm here, I'm feeling tension as I'm going up the top. I'm also feeling kind of a stretch through my torso here, right? Because everything's kind of switching directions. So I'm going to feel a stretch. To me, some people might call that tightness. I'm feeling like a stretch that's going on. It's like a rubber band. You're building tension, right? So you're feeling like a stretch. Everything's kind of stretching out as you're getting up to the top, and then you're feeling more of that rebound effect in your hands that's coming down because you're building up speed. You're going to be building up tension in your hands for sure. J.H. Hassler says, "You're the man, Q." Thanks. Says, "Thank you for the help. I have another question. Let's say I get to the top of the backswing with everything in the right position, spine, elbow, hands at the point at the top. Is it wrong to shove your left leg hip back as hard as you can to get the hips to clear, or is that clearing the hips too soon?" It just depends on what actually happens when you try to do that, right? So if you're getting if you're up to the top and then your arms fall behind you, that's going to be a problem. So as long you can rotate as hard and as fast as you want, as long as your arms in the club are in sync with that, right? So if you go up to the top and then you just go bam like that and your arm gets behind you, right, you're going to be in a tough spot, right? Because generally what's going to happen is unless you can rotate and get your hips to be like 80 degrees open at impact like a Jim Furyk, it's not really going to work very well. And even if you can do that, it's not going to be the fastest thing to do, right? What we want to do is basically your club head speed is going to come almost a lot from your body rotation. And we want most of our club head speed to come from our arms and our wrists. And our body rotation creates momentum for that, right? When you look at the longest hitters, what they're doing is they're getting here, and those arms come in more in, and then the body is creating momentum, right? Whereas if I get here and I get my arm behind me because I've kind of basically got my hips too far out in front of everything, right? And now my arms aren't in sync. Well, now my golf swing's like this. This just isn't going to be very fast, right? Even if and most people just can't move that way, so they don't even need to worry about that. What's going to happen with most people is they're going to get here, right? And then they're going to stall their body so that way they can push their hands back in front, right? Or what's going to happen is they're going to get here and then they're just going to block it. Their path's going to get too far out to the right and they're just going to block everything out to the right. So but that doesn't mean that you feeling like you're, shoving your left leg and hip back. That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. So you just have to look at what actually happens when I do that. So Don says, I use my pitching wedge almost exclusively around the green, but oftentimes there are bare spots and my ball is on in those situations. Should I consider using like an 8 or a 9 for bump and runs? On grass, I don't have much problem using my pitching wedge to bump and run, but on tight lies, I sometimes don't hit it clean with the pitching wedge. Yeah, it can be a little bit easier, certainly with a less sharp of a leading edge. The pitching wedge there's still a decent amount of loft on there, so you're going to have a little bit of a leading edge. So what I would say is when you're on a tight lie, I would either maybe use the 8 or a 9 iron because it may make it a little bit easier for you. But if you still need to have that loft on there, you still need to be a little bit softer with the shot. What you can do is you can kind of stand this club up a little bit and play it off the toe. What that does is that gets this leading edge kind of down to the ground a little bit more, and then that can help you to get underneath the ball better. So we kind of look like this. Right, so if I'm hitting that bump and run shot, maybe I'd usually hit it kind of like this, where my club is kind of flat to the ground. I'm just going to stand it up a little bit, play it on the toe, right? And I'm going to hit it on the part of the club face where the toe is kind of grounded to the ground, grounded to the turf, and then you'll be able to get under it a lot more easily. It's not going to tend to dig as much. All right, we got about 15 minutes left. If anybody has any more questions. So Troy B says, I know you're supposed to relax on the downswing, but I tend to be tense and try to hit the ball hard. Do you have tips or a drill for this? No, I mean, you're not necessarily going to be relaxed. Like your muscles are contracting and you're trying to hit the ball hard. So it's not going to necessarily be relaxed. What I would say is just to create a good flow in your swing. So that way, your tension, what you don't want is your tension to throw the club out and everything. So what you want is you want to have this club kind of lagging behind, so that way you can release it and out in front and all that stuff. So really what it is, you just need to work through the top speed golf system, the top speed lag course, the straight line release course. Those are going to help you to get that club kind of, lagging behind you, so that way you can release it out in front. Get to those courses, click the instruction tab, then top speed golf system, and then work through those courses. Gary S says, thanks. I will try a stronger grip with the fused right wrist. Should I roll my arms at the top to shallow the club? Yes, there's definitely going to be some forearm rotation as you get up to the top, right? So we're going to need to be doing some of this, right, to shallow out the club, right? Because if I don't do any forearm rotation, then the top of my swing looks like this. So I need some forearm rotation, so that way I can get that club shallowing out. So that's going to be something that's going to be kind of gradually happening as you get up to the top of the swing. So yes, we definitely need some forearm roll as you get up to the top. And even in the start of the downswing, we want to feel like the club is still, the arms are still kind of rolling as we're coming down, so to get that club in a good position, so that way you can turn through. All right, we got about 10 minutes left here. If we got any more questions. So Don says, so I noticed something at the range yesterday that is really snapped my wrist through at impact. Has really helped me in drawing the ball. I have not gotten to the release part of the course yet. So is that snapping at impact that release that you often talk about? Yeah, we want that. We want that club to snap through impact for sure. That's what releasing the club is getting that club to release through impact. We don't want to. We want to create lag, right? We want to get this club to lag, but we only want to get it to lag so that way we can release it, right? If I didn't lag the club at all, right, meaning, lagging the club basically means just getting the club head behind the hands, right? So if I didn't lag the club at all and I just brought it here, well, this wouldn't be very fast, right? So what I want to do is I want to lag that club behind so that way I can release it, right? So I want to release that lag. So that's what we talk about in the straight line release course, is getting that club to lag. Then we want to release it. So Troy P says, should I close the driver club face at address like irons to prevent a slice? You certainly could. If that helps you to prevent a slice, then yeah, absolutely. Because we got to understand what causes a slice. What causes a slice is the club face being too open, right? So if we close the club face, it can certainly help to get the face less open, right? And prevent the slice for sure. But we also need to make sure that we're shallowing out the club, right? So in order to hit a draw, we need to swing into out with a closed face. That's going to get the ball to draw. So what I'd recommend doing if you struggle with slicing the driver is to work through the 20-minute shallowing fix, but with your driver. Because we actually need to shallow out the club a little bit more with the driver because of the ball position. The ball position is more forward with the driver, right? So with an iron, ball position is more toward the middle of my stance. My club's working into out, into out, into out. It turns the corner. Well, if I shallow it the same amount with an iron that I do with a driver, my ball position's up here. Well, by the time I'm getting to the ball, my club's working to the left, and I'm not shallow anymore, right? So we actually need to shallow out the club more with the driver, so that way the club can be working a little bit into out by the time it gets to the ball. All right, so J.H. Hassler says, I believe one day you said something about feeling like your shoulders move like a Ferris wheel. I don't seem to find the video anymore, and I was just curious if you remember that. And if so, could you maybe go over that once more? Thank you again. I think that was probably an office hour highlight, and the office hours highlights get pushed out, month after month, so it's probably not on there. So basically, what I mean by that is, if you're coming down through impact and you're coming out of your posture, your shoulders are coming through more level, right? So if I'm coming through, if I'm out of my posture, I'm standing up out of it, my shoulders are going to come through like this. But if you have the feeling that your shoulders are rotating more like a Ferris wheel, which would be more like this, right now, are they literally turning on a vertical like that? No, but that could be a good feel to help you to get into that position. So it's really about kind of staying in your posture. If I do that, I have to have some right side bend in my downswing, right? My body's got to be opening up right side bend as I'm coming down, right? So it's going to be more like this. So my right shoulder, my trail shoulder is going to be a lot closer to the golf ball, right? When I'm early releasing and I'm standing up out of it, my right shoulder is still going to be a little bit closer, but it's not going to be like this. My chest is typically going to be squaring up to the ball instead of being open, right? So that's really what that's about, is just, basically staying in your posture better. If you struggle to stay in your posture or to have your shoulders turn, on a steeper incline through impact, because when you look at better players, typically what you're going to see is in the backswing, their shoulders are going to be pointing somewhere, 6-8 feet on the other side of the golf ball. But in the downswing, they're typically going to be 2-4 feet on the other side of the golf ball, right? Their shoulders are going to be a lot steeper, right? When you look at better players. But when we look at recreational golfers, especially those who stand up out of their posture, typically what's happening is that their shoulders coming through contact are, even higher than they were in the backswing. And, that's going to typically lead to an early release and things like that. But you have to look at the root cause as to why you're doing that, So The most typical root causes are coming down steep in an open club face, right? So if I'm coming down steep, I'm going to tend to stand up out of it to be able to shallow up the club. If you look here, if I'm like this is a steep shaft, meaning the butt end of the club is kind of pointing more inside the golf ball. There's other things that go into it. Like I can be like this, and technically the butt end of the club is pointing outside the golf ball, but this is still also very steep because my hands are way out there. But generally speaking, if that butt end of the club is pointing inside the ball, that's steep. So one way I can get the butt end of the club pointing more outside the ball is to stand up. Now I stand up out of it. Now the club's shallowing out. I can hit a shot. I can hit a shallow shot. So I've come down steep early, shallowed it late. But in order to do that, I've had to stand up out of it, and that's going to get my shoulders more level and from what I'm talking about. So I can try all I want. If I'm coming down steep and I try to keep my shoulders, kind of that Ferris wheel, I'm just going to come down even steeper coming down. That's not going to lead to good golf shots. So you have to look at what the root cause is. A lot of times people, the root cause is coming down steep. Another one's the face being open. So if I'm coming down and this face is open, well, I have to do something to square it up. So what a lot of people do to square the face up is to release the club. So what we understand is that lagging the club opens the face, releasing the club closes the face. So if I have this face open, what I can do is I can release the club earlier, right, to get it squared up, right? So if I'm coming into contact, if you pretend like you're like looking at like a worm's eye view of the golf ball, right, and this is me coming down to hit it, if I have this club face open, right, what I can do is I can stall my body and flip my hands to square it up, right? Or what I can do is I can keep going through contact and I can have my hands in front, but that face stays open, and I can have my right shoulder closer, right? So most people aren't going to do this. They're going to do this in order to get the ball to go toward the target. So if I have this face open, I'm going to release the club squared up. Well, if I release the club, I have to move my body away from the golf ball, because if I release it and I'm staying down, I'm just going to hit the ground behind the ball. So I've got to stand up out of it to make room for the club, and now my shoulders have come through level, right? So the 20-minute shallowing fix is most likely, going to be the first step for most people to get the stay in your posture and get the body working better through contact. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to y'all next time.